What's up? This is Outie 5000. It's our 90s podcast. I'm Dixon. This is Joe D.
What's up?
So throughout the duration of this, we're going to talk about all kinds of things. The fashion, the food, the brands, a lot of stuff that isn't around anymore. But we're radio guys, so of course we're going to start with music. And what better place to start than what really kicked the 90s off? Grunge. So let's start at the beginning of the 90s. Things were wild, right? Like, it was hair bands.
Yeah.
And then some things that were adjacent to hair bands, but not really hair bands. Most namely, Guns N' Roses, Metallica,
Yeah.
Faith No More. The Chili Peppers were just starting to make their way to the top of the heap, but in a weird way, they also had sort of a hair metal heritage, being from LA, being around those bands.
Yep.
And I think it was the success of Jane's Addiction that sort of changed the course for the Red Hot Chili Peppers in a way. And then you just fast forward to 1991, 1992, and born from tragedy, grunge began. Right? So in the late 80s, early 90s, Seattle was burgeoning with Green River and Mother Love Bone, both of which had future members of Pearl Jam.
Yep.
With Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard. And of course you had the indie darlings of the time with Sonic Youth and Mudhoney. There was the early beginnings of Soundgarden. And then the more metallic end of what grunge became with bands like Tad, who quite frankly are one of the most underrated bands of that time, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So what's your earliest memory of grunge itself? Because I know we're about 5 years apart in age, so in 1991, I was just ending high school. You were just beginning high school.
Yep.
So I think there's enough of a gap that we're going to come at this from different angles.
I mean, for me, it was just kind of how refreshing grunge was, because like you mentioned, we're coming out of the hair band era, where you had all the bands looked the same, they sounded the same, they had the same formula, everybody had to have a power ballad. And I never was into the hair scene. At that time, I was listening to Metallica. The only thing even remotely close to hair was for like Skid Row and Tesla, which I never really considered to be hair bands.
I think maybe the first Skid Row record falls under hair metal, but then you get into Slave to the Grind, and it had a lot more to do with metal. And especially given the fact that was Pantera's first full U.S. arena tour,
Right.
Was opening for Skid Row on that Slave to the Grind tour, I think speaks volumes about what that band became.
Yep.
And I'm in the same boat, because around that same time, I was really into a couple of things that were adjacent to the hair metal scene, and all of the dudes with the hairspray hair loved The Cult and King's X.
Yeah,
I don't think either of those bands fall into hair metal territory.
No.
I think both of them The Cult had a very distinct Doors influence, where I think King's X was very much the Beatles.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand why they were lumped in, but I don't necessarily understand, even in this present day, how they're still mentioned when that era comes up.
I don't either. That never made sense to me.
So in Seattle, there was a band called Mother Love Bone, which was a little glammy. Right, if we're being honest, especially going back and looking, Andrew Wood, their late frontman, definitely had the big blonde hair and makeup, and I got to be honest, musically it wasn't akin to that, but visually, it's difficult to go back and watch early Mother Love Bone stuff to see Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard in silky open shirts with long flowing hair.
Very different look from Pearl Jam.
Very different look. So I think it was the death of Andrew Wood, heroin overdose, that really sort of was the precursor to letting grunge emerge and sort of start its first chapter.
Yeah. No, I agree. I just think music fans were kind of starved, especially younger fans like us, were starved for something new. You know, we were all tired of hair and the generic rock metal that was out there at the time, so
I was so happy to see anything happen other than what was happening with bands like Motley Crue, Poison, Slaughter. I mean, they're all kind of interchangeable, right? Just some very pretty men writing very cookie-cutter corporate hair metal songs. So for me, it was the end of an era that needed to come, and happily, grunge was born.